Thanks for stopping by. I'm glad you're here. Why not relax and listen to a story or two? It's our vagabond story from our first RV renovation on to getting legal and finally getting on the road a little bit. Our first RV renovation started in Michigan before we actually became full-time RVers. But as our Michigan time started to wind down and winter started to show up, it became time to work on the cab, as you see here. Driving and riding in the cab was a very noisy affair. At road speeds, shouting barely overcame the road noise. We could hardly have any kind of a conversation. Somehow, we needed to quiet all that noise down. The cab was covered with worn carpeting, and the seats actually were threadbare. The threads holding the different parts of the seats were coming unseamed. So it looked like we were going to be getting new chairs and somehow fixing all the noise. So we ordered from a RV supplier in California some new chairs. They were put on order, and it took actually several months for them to actually arrive in Michigan. I was away whenever the semi-truck backed up to unload these sort of heavy and broken cardboard boxes that held the chairs, but somehow Wendy and the driver managed to drag all that heavy stuff into the apartment. That was some real work with some heavy chairs. So we were a little bit worried. We wondered if weight was going to become a problem. After we did a few calculations and realized what was going on, we understood that the old chairs were just about as heavy as the new chairs, so it wasn't going to be that big of a deal. So I went ahead and cleaned up the cab. I got out all that old threadbare carpeting, pulled out the old chairs, and that was sort of a problem because the old chairs were bolted in using some sort of spline sockets or something, so I had to make, of course, another trip to the hardware store. But we pulled all that stuff off and fed some of that to the dumpster, and then started cleaning up the cab. It's been there for several years. It's a little bit dirty, a little bit of trash floating around in there. But we got some kill mat squares made with some kind of a gummy substance that you sort of stick down on the floor, and the weight of the kill mat kind of is supposed to anyway block some of the noise. That was actually a pretty easy thing to do. I had a pair of scissors and a roller, and so I just cut the different squares into shapes that they needed to be in, rolled them out on the floor, and pretty soon it was all done. Then I ordered a chunk of vinyl flooring, vinyl car flooring, that was supposed to be the right size and shape to fit in the 450 Ford truck kind of thing. It was pretty good, but I had to do a lot of trimming and so forth to get it all actually to fit in right. Part of that process involved removing the doghouse, the little stick out in a van where the back end of the engine and transmission lives. So I pulled that all out, and sure enough, just like every place else in this old RV, there was a squirrel nest in there. So I spent probably a lot of time digging out that old squirrel's nest and throwing the stuff away. I didn't really want to start taking off the input manifold and stuff like this to actually get back up in there. But using a shop vac and kind of a couple of screwdrivers and so forth, I was able to get it cleaned out pretty well. Typical deal when you get an old RV. The vinyl went in pretty easily. Interestingly, it was a lot bigger than it needed to be. Apparently, the vinyl was designed for a much longer cab than what we have. So I actually cut out quite a bit of vinyl pieces to get this vinyl flooring to actually fit in place. It was kind of surprising, but it worked. And like I say, we had a dumpster right there, so I fed a lot of things to the dumpster. So with a cleaned out engine and a new floor, it was time to put the new chairs in place. I went ahead and bought swivels for the chair. So there's the chair, and then underneath that is the swivel, and then of course is the floor. The dream that I had was I could swivel around these chairs, point them in toward the coach, and have a little bit more area, a little bit extra seating and so forth. Sadly, that did not work. The step from the floor of the cab up to the floor of the coach is large enough that the swivel just can't reach over. But I didn't take them back. This was kind of the start of the big COVID thing, and it would take forever to do anything. So I just let them be, put them in place, and bolted them down. Putting the swivels wasn't too bad. I actually attached those to the chairs first, and then with a little bit of finagling and some levers to help out, I was able to kind of push these chairs up into place and bolt them back down. Then, of course, you got to check to see if the seat belts are all working. And happily, I didn't get any beeps and any idiot lights complaining that the seat belts weren't attached whenever I attached them. Everything was working. Sometimes it's sweet. The new fabric chairs are really pretty comfortable. The lady at the chair store had recommended these particular chairs, and so I just went with it because I figured she would know more than I did. Apparently, she did know her business. The next step, we wanted to take it for a ride and see how it sounded. Well, sure enough, the cab was a lot quieter. Even at highway speeds, Wendy and I could hold a conversation without screaming at each other. So that's one thing good. The chairs are really quite comfortable. It's easy to sit here and cruise along. We were really happy about that. Two things good. Wendy's chair was too high from the floor, so her legs could just reach the floor. That's okay, I suppose, if you're going to take a short trip. But if you're going to spend some hours in there, that's not a bad thing. Well, as Meatloaf said, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But why not try for 3 out of 3, just to see if you can do it? So I did. There's lots of scraps of stuff in the shop, some 3/4 inch plywood, some old legs from a drop leaf table that a friend of ours had given us. There's some mat, some floor mat kind of stuff. All this stuff sounded like you could put things together and make a little strange stool to put in there, and it might work just fine. So I thought I'd try it. I cut up the little piece of the 3/4 inch plywood with a jigsaw to get some kind of funny shape so it actually fit in the leg well down there. And I cut off the ends of the old tables to make little tables to put underneath the piece of plywood, and I got some of that shop matting and put in there to kind of ease the feet as they set down there. Well, this oddly shaped little stool actually seems to work. It works well for Wendy. Her toes can now sit nicely on the stool, just like they should, making a long trip a whole lot easier. The exhaust manifold on the right side goes right underneath her seat, her floor. And after a while, it gets pretty hot down there. With that stool standing up off and out of the way, she doesn't feel all of that extra heat nearly as much. Of course, this lug of an engine makes lots of vibrations and stuff, and that shop matting kind of cools down that vibration, making it a lot more comfortable to sit there. So we were sort of pretty happy with the whole thing. You know, some wood, some old pieces, some glue, slap it together. It's not beautiful, but it works, and you can hardly see it way down there in the leg well. By this point in time, by the time I'm actually making this video, it's been several months we've been driving around, and it's still working, so I'm still pretty happy about it. Well, with the cab kind of fixed up, it's time to work on a couple, 3 other tasks to finish up this renovation. One of those is fixing up the overcab area. But that is another story.